You know lobsters in District 9. What does it look like in real life? Although not as abstract as in the movies. But this thing has a real story. It's hard for normal people to eat at the dinner table. And if you're lucky enough to meet, don't eat. Take a photo and post it in the comment section. Soon someone will take over the rest of your life. Deep in the Southern Ocean lies an island. There are hundreds of plants and animals on it. And there is also the world. Creatures you can't find anywhere else. That's the mysterious thylacine. The creature is said to be extinct. But some people are not so convinced. But that's not the only one Jeremy's looking for. And the creatures of the river. Tasmanian giant lobster. The world's largest freshwater, spineless creature. It can grow to be as big as a dog. This makes it very famous. But now this creature is endangered. With Jeremy in Tasmania, his mood also began to become excited. There's a lot of magic here, after all, like this creature right here. It's a hedgehog called an echidna, and where Jeremy found him, right next to where the plane landed. Although the echidna is not as rare as the giant lobster, but on this vast island, it's not easy to see this thing. As Jeremy pulled out the map, another interesting phenomenon comes to mind. That is, there are many rivers here, but there are only 25 species of fish, less than 35 species of crayfish. And this situation makes Jeremy feel a pinch. You don't even know how to start. But no matter how many doubts there are, Jeremy's still going to have to check it out. So he chose a place. It's an interconnected lake, with Jeremy to the nearby river. Also put on waterproof clothes, and took out some crab pots. Although the biological protection here is very strict. But Jeremy has got a warrant to make an arrest here. But that's all you can do. You can't take it away or slaughter it. As he places the traps in different places. I've been waiting for half an hour. My waterproof jacket is dry again. Trying to pull up the first cage, only to find it empty. But he's got a couple of them. Just didn't expect 4 cages in a row. It's all empty. But the last one had a lobster in it. He immediately grabbed it in his hands and keep talking about it, about the growth and reproduction of this thing. But the more he talked, the less confident he became. Because this thing is too small. It doesn't look like a Tasmanian giant lobster. So in order to ensure the seriousness of this exploration, Jeremy took pictures of it. We'll get a chance to check it out back. As he continues on to his destination, I saw no sign on the road, but there's a car parked in front. So Jeremy was ready to ask. Then he saw a policeman. Quickly asked the situation. I got it from him, too. Carp eradication is underway here because they are so fertile and very edible. So to protect the ecology here, we have to wipe out the carp here. So the native creatures here, there is room to live. And it just so happens that today the police are going to survey the South Lake. This happens to be one of his destinations. So he went with him. Look at the traps they used to set. What's in there now? As the two stepped into the water. It's also the beginning of the retrieval of traps. And there's a lot of stuff in there. But there doesn't seem to be a lobster. As the two men poured things into the box. Just a lot of eels. But this thing is a carnivore. But they do like to eat crustaceans. Among them is the giant lobster. As the two men backed the eels. Looking at the piles of little fish again. Although this has a lot of benefits. But he didn't have what he wanted. As the two men picked up another cage. Found a lot of stuff. Among them are many trout. Although these fish are also exotic, but not for the giant lobster. But this fish also has an impact on the ecology here. Although Jeremy didn't find any lobsters. But that officer back there, there's a crawfish expert here. Jeremy hurried over, ready to see if we can get something. And where he was, there are quite a few well-preserved species. And it was all Alistair's work. As the two officially meet, I also learned it from the professor. It's not just giant lobsters here, and the male of the species. Look at the pot of lobster in front of you. Jeremy suddenly remembered something. That's the picture that was taken earlier, under the observation of the professor. Turns out this is indeed one of the species here, but it's not a giant lobster. After all the creatures back, that's very unique. But this thing is a relative of the giant lobster. Although this lobster isn't exactly what Jeremy wanted, but the professor gave him a message. That's the news that giant lobsters can be found. Followed Jeremy over there. Also came to the library here. As he met the curator here, he took Jeremy to a place. That's the real book collection here. To keep this thing safe, both must wear gloves. After all, the natural oils in your hands would destroy this fragile writing. And this book is full of them. A drawing of life on the island. As Jeremy gradually climbs over, I also saw a painting of a giant lobster. After careful observation, it was amazing how lifelike the painting was. Then another book, and this is what it says. The habits of all living things. As he finds his purpose, also found the lobster. Just like a blackfish. Even the locations are very similar. As he wrote it all down, I'm leaving right away. Get ready to look for places where lobsters might be. But there are more blackfish. Jeremy is going to find the fish first, so you can quickly find the lobster. With Jeremy back in the woods, I suddenly remembered something. So why not ask the locals first? They must know the neighborhood pretty well. So Jeremy immediately turned the car around, came to a nearby village. I just happened to meet someone, so he quickly approached to inquire. I heard it from him. There are snakeheads a few miles ahead. So Jeremy immediately set off again. Until there's no more road ahead. Jeremy got out of the car, opened the tent on the car. Looks like he planned to spend the night in the woods. He followed him into the forest. There are many tall trees here. It's like it's been growing for hundreds of years. But then suddenly he heard something. He quickly stopped his steps, then said, "And when he's done with us," and began to walk on. Soon he came to a river too. Thought this would be it, where the man just said, while he was watching carefully. But there was an unexpected discovery. It turned out to be the NT animal platypus. This is the first time Jeremy's met. After all, it was only available in books. I didn't think I was so lucky this time, although Jeremy watched it very carefully. But he did not lose sight of the purpose of his visit. So he looked for his fishing spot. As he came to a very calm surface of water, he quickly took out his pulley. Get ready to go fishing here. As he finished stitching the poles together, the sky began to grow dark. But he spent so much time, and there was no rush. Well, that's a very old man. As he began to swing, and that's where you keep doing it. But nothing happened. So he pulled the thread back, put the bait on top. They were replaced with earthworms. After all, there's one thing every fisherman knows. That's when fishing hits a wall. All you have to do is pull out the worms. The fish in that water will react quickly. But there seems to be something wrong with this law. The sky is beginning to rain. Jeremy's pole is still not responding. It made him a little uncomfortable, but he still wouldn't give up, just sitting there all alone. But it was an hour later. The pole finally responded. So he quickly retrieved the line and picked up the catch. And this fish is a blackfish. But the fish refused to bite. Still makes him a little angry. But what can he do? Had to release it again. But it also made him sure of one thing. That's around here. There must be giant lobsters out there. Then Jeremy started back to the car. And the speed is very fast. Like there's something chasing you. As he climbed into the tent, he was also ready for bed. When the next day came, Jeremy just left the house a while ago. There's another biological wallaby in sight. This was a great surprise to Jeremy. I didn't expect to see a rat just out of a pregnancy bag. With him out of here, ready to continue the lobster hunt, a house was found, so he went straight to the door and knocked. That's very polite. And this guy heard what Jeremy was up to. They provide a helping hand. There's an expert nearby. He followed him, with Todd's help too. But he has a request, which means we can't reveal this last location. After all, there are too many poachers trying to hunt this creature. And the slow-breeding lobster. It takes a long time to redevelop the race. As the two of them zigzagged along the road, I got Jeremy confused too. But to make sure no one knows where it is, the cameras are still off. After I don't know how long the journey, the two also arrived at their destination. There may be a place for the lobster at last. The two men walked into the forest. Jeremy has discovered something. That's the environment of these woods. It seems to be a good fit for a boa constrictor. It made him a little scared. After all, he has no experience in this field. The two men came to a river, also put on the waterproof suit immediately, and step into this babbling stream. As the two begin their search, Todd, on the other hand, is going in the right direction. The crevices and rotting wood under the land and the river. Looks like he's got a problem with these lobsters. That's very understanding. But they didn't find anything, did they? But Todd brought equipment, ready to go, high-tech to find it. With the two men back in the river, Jeremy started his search right away. And with his efforts, still no harvest in this river. So they decided to look for another river. And the river they're in now. But it's a little different. The visibility here is really bad. The whole thing has to be seen on the river. But what happened to their tech? But then they made a discovery. There are lobsters in this river. So Jeremy immediately reached out. I just grabbed the lobster right out. And after being lifted out of the water, you can see this shrimp is really ugly. But the two are still very excited. But underneath the shrimp there are eggs. And there seems to be a lot of them. So the two quickly went ashore to inspect it. With Todd's series of operations, learned that the lobster was just growing up. So Todd quickly inserted a chip. That's how you know how they're growing now. And now Jeremy is very excited. It's such a big freshwater lobster. It's the first time he's seen it. And the river is very long. It's on the main road back there. And possibly the existence of this giant lobster. And after 2 hours of searching, and found lobsters again. But this hiding place, it's under those rotten, dead trees. Although it's not the same as the first one. But Jeremy just reached out, slowly pull it out of the water. Although this one has no eggs, but such a big body, it's still surprising. It's worth seeing halfway across the globe. Just have to wait until the race reflourished. Well, that's all for this program. Give it a thumbs up, and let's look forward to the next episode. If you want a crocodile fresh out of its shell, then be like this old den. Fly in to a remote part of Western Australia. Pull the baby crocodile out of the river, and hold it in your hand and listen to the beautiful sound. It's no better than what we have at home. Due to the Fitzroy River in Western Australia, there was a disgusting creature, led to native animals here. It starts to become very rare. And that got Jeremy curious. so I came to a town near the river. That's Derby, surrounded by wilderness. But for clarity, he came to the most popular tavern in the area. Two people right here. Something Jeremy's curious about. They say crocodiles here used to be afraid of humans, and now they're suddenly attacking, and the phenomenon is increasing. Jeremy was immediately alarmed. Because of massive biological change, it's often a sign of ecological problems. To understand why, Jeremy went immediately to the nearby river, ready to see what's wrong here. Although it seems very peaceful here, but Jeremy feels like this river is not simple. As he prepares the fishing rod in his hand, I just threw the pole right out, so he began to watch the water. But the way the river is calm, but it made Jeremy even more nervous. But then there was a sudden movement on his pole, so Jeremy quickly began to return the line. But after pulling the hook out of the water, but it turns out it's empty. This made him wonder what was it, to do this without any movement, but in the weight behind. I got something again, but there's still nothing left after the thread is pulled back. This made him very uncomfortable. But for the next 8 hours, Jeremy didn't get any more. This led him to think of another possibility. There is no living thing in the river, and hunger leads to crocodiles. There is a fear of humans. In a long wait, Jeremy's patience has worn thin. But to see what's going on here, he was going to go back and ask around, see if there are any surprises, but find someone to ask. It takes a lot of time and energy. So Jeremy found a local radio station. After he introduced himself, he raised his own questions, and he got it from a guy named Dave. This is already widespread, but one of the most obvious. In the upper reaches of the river. It's 100 miles away, but Jeremy is rigorous in order to explore. Decided to head first to Camberlin, 100 miles away. After reaching the position, Jeremy and found a fisherman willing to take him deep, because there is a river dam here, keeping most of the living things out of the way. If there's a problem with this river, well, you can obviously find it here. As the two continue to deepen, the fishermen also parked their boats. Jeremy was there to explore too. The fishing rod was replaced with fishing line. To cope with the complex environment in the river, he even changed the bait to shrimp. It's still very attractive to predators, after all, as he lowered the line into the water. It is also the beginning of constant pulling in there. Make the bait look like it's still active. After he pulled down for a minute, all of a sudden, there's a bite hook, as he pulls the line out of the water, only to find out it was a turtle, and this side-neck turtle is not what he wants, because this creature was born here. It's not what's causing the problem at all. When Jeremy saw what he didn't get, he decided to take out his fishing rod again. It's a lot safer than that, after all. As he walked down the river, he swung his rod, still managed to catch the line, but it didn't cause any problems. But it still made him more careful. But he was out there for hours. But I have not felt the feedback given by the fishing rod. This made him very curious. What kind of creature is it? Take this river over 100 miles. It's all been cleaned up, but in order to know for sure, the whole river is almost devoid of life. Jeremy continued his search, but on the road, Jeremy suddenly found something very interesting. It's on the bulletin board by the gas station. There were poisonous sea toads, but this creature is native to South America. Although in 1935, a small group was sent here, but the goal is to get rid of pests, and then this thing showed up, unable to contain the mass reproduction, because this creature is highly toxic, caused all the animals that ate him. They'll all end up poisoned, and that allows them to reproduce more quickly. But this thing was originally on the coast, and now it's over here. In order to be sure of this matter, Jeremy's going to ask the local authorities. And he found a scientist, Dave, because he tracks sea toads. That's how Jeremy found out. Those creatures were supposed to invade 2 kilometers a year. But now they have evolved. It's now able to invade 50 kilometers a year. And it's all because of their back legs. From the original short to longer. That sounds pretty amazing. In such a short period of time, you've completed an evolutionary adaptation to the environment. Although the change is small, but it still provides a very good convenience. After all, that's a 25% increase. I heard a lot from Dave though, but Jeremy still wanted to see it. After all, everyone knows the experts. But Dave did provide a place for it. That's in the neighborhood. You can see it right there. And this is right next to the Fitzroy River. Jeremy also learned from local accounts. A year ago, there were no sea toads here, but almost overnight. And there were a lot of these creatures. It's pretty amazing. And that made Jeremy even more curious. So he started around here. A careful search was conducted, but after looking for a long time, did not find. So he got some kids to help. After the efforts of all, the children soon found the sea toad. As Jeremy stepped forward to observe, make sure this is what you want. So he immediately reached out and grabbed it, although it almost made the toad get away. But Jeremy still got his hands on it, and after picking it up, quickly watched the sea toad carefully. You can see this stuff too. Not only the muscles of the body developed, and the strength of the hind legs is enormous, but it's all observational after all. We're not sure about any of this. So Jeremy found a clearing. He laid the toad on the ground, and this thing is going really fast. Jeremy can barely keep up. But it took a while to block it off, as he struggles to pick up the toad, and convinced him of the speed of this thing. And then they put this thing away, and after dealing with the toad, Jeremy quickly washed his hands. After all, sea toads are poisonous if you accidentally get it in your mouth, and the consequences are terrible. Then Jeremy found it again. 2 local community elders. I got it from them too. These sea toads have only been around for a year. I ate up all the fish around here. They even changed their habits. And after hearing that, Jeremy was very frightened. After all, this phenomenon is only the beginning. What happens if the toad stays too long? To understand this change, Jeremy decided to move on. Look at the water life there. What has it become? And on the way there, Jeremy made another unexpected discovery. It was at a motel down the road. He saw sheets of sea toads, and very close to him, these are cubs though, but these hundreds of sea toads. It's still very frightening, especially for those with trypophobia. Jeremy is seeing this. Hurry up and move on, which is the man-made Argyle Lake. It just so happens that one of the experts here is Dr. Rakira. He had been studying sea toads here. What will it do to lakes and rivers? And here too, he found something terrible, that there had been a large number of crocodile deaths in the lake. Autopsies revealed poison in their stomachs, and they all belonged to sea toads. As the 2 men disembarked from the plane, Rakira decided to show him the little crocodile situation here. After all, this is how you can feel intuitively. As the 2 searched the shore, the pair also found baby crocodiles. Jeremy grabbed it quickly, although this one is still very young, but it still has a chance. Not like those adult crocodiles. After all, his mouth can only eat little toads. And in this matter, the sea toad. There's no toxin in the body, but it still makes them sick. But it makes him remember, sea toads do no good when they eat them. And that's what makes these crocodiles. It may repopulate in the future. Although Jeremy now knows about crocodiles, but he still wanted to know the water. What's happening to those big fish now? So he immediately took out his fishing rod, starts swinging over the water. But I didn't expect him to throw it. I have something to bait me. As he keeps pulling in there, he also managed to catch a fish. But this shovel-nosed catfish, it basically lives only at the bottom of lakes. And sea toads can't go too far. So this thing doesn't prove anything, even if it could eat a toad. As he let the fish go, also hurriedly continue fishing. But one bait after another. They're catfish that live at the bottom of the lake. This made him very uncomfortable, because it's not going to get him what he wants. So in order to be able to understand a possible future for Fitzroy, Jeremy is ready to search a river whose waters are roughly the same, to see if any fish survived, and that river was the Oder. As he arrived at the position, Jeremy had a plan too. That is, regardless of everything else, I fish for Barramundi. If this creature, 10 years after the sea toad invasion, still alive in the river, that would represent the Fitzroy River. There will also be fish. But just then it began to rain, and it was like a lot of rain. With the rain falling harder and harder, Jeremy found out something. There's thunder in the sky right now, and he held the rod so high. It's like waiting to be struck by lightning. But then Jeremy's rod had a reaction, so he was in the thunder. Keep raising the pole over and over again. But after a few pulls, Jeremy noticed that the hook seemed to be hanging off the bottom. But in order to catch the fish, he's still out there trying to save it. But then something happened. The line suddenly broke. This made him very angry. Even when the line went down, I had the show actively muted. But after Jeremy looked at the line, turns out it wasn't a rock in the river. It's the fish through the teeth, and bite it through, and that scares Jeremy a little bit. But he did learn 2 things. That there is life in this river, and it's the rainy season. Those Barramundi are in breeding season too. They're bound to reach their estuary source by now. So Jeremy rushed over there right away, as he gets to nowhere near. Also from the big boat ride, for a small boat staffed by rangers. As the 3 set out, it's been nearly 3 hours, and to the Barramundi spawning grounds. So Jeremy immediately took out his fishing rod, start swinging here, although under constant testing. What took a bite out of the bait? But there's nothing to catch. That got Jeremy curious. He quickly threw another stroke, and this one's just thrown out. I suddenly had a reaction, so Jeremy hurried back to the line. But then he let it get away, although he regrets it very much. But that didn't stop him from continuing to cast. After all, that was a fish. Follow him to another fish. Jeremy immediately pulled the lever violently, not giving a fish a chance, as he pulled the fish into the boat. Although Jeremy did manage to land a fish. But this queenfish is a sea fish. You don't come into contact with sea toads that way. So Jeremy set him free. As the sun goes down, Jeremy is also back on shore. He also heard from 2 rangers. The sea toad here is very powerful. Not only does it jump fast, and they can swim in the sea. As the next day came, Jeremy decided to fish in another place. That's the river in front of you. And what happens in places like this? Those fish are bound to come into contact with the toad. He could catch a fish if he was here. So this is for the Fitzroy River. It's a very beautiful thing. Of course, there are other rivers that are being invaded. And came to the shore. The rangers suddenly made a discovery. It seems that there are crocodiles in the river. So Jeremy quickly told him to look around. And he immediately started swinging. He just didn't think of it. This is the hook that went into the water. I got something to bite on right away. Jeremy was pleasantly surprised. But this fish has a lot of strength. He's a little stuck, but with all his experience, and managed to pull it to shore. And this 38-inch fish, it's the Barramundi he's been looking for. And this fish in the hand, not only does it indicate the possibility of the Fitzroy River, and revealed the present. The fish in the river have learned. How do you avoid those sea toads? Well, that's all for this program. Give it a thumbs up, and let's look forward to the next episode.